Hey everyone, on today's episode of Noon, I am excited to introduce you all to an exceptional individual and good friend of mine, Ryan, who is a firefighter and a nurse. His passion for sharing his stories comes from a genuine desire to pass on his experiences to the younger generations, hoping to inspire and educate them. In both roles, he has encountered numerous challenges, and his dedication to learning from each experience makes him a true role model. Ryan also discusses the support he found within his fire department, who have helped him cope with both the trauma of personal life events and difficult calls. Join us for a thought-provoking and engaging conversation as Ryan shares his adventures, lessons learned, and an unwavering passion that drives him to serve and protect others. Let's get started. All right, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on the 911 Nonsense podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate that you reached out to me. You had told me that you wanted to share your story, so let's kind of jump into that.
Okay. Well, first of all, my name's Ryan, and I've been a paramedic since 1999. I'm going on 24 years of experience. In that experience with just being a paramedic provider, I worked in the rural setting and the local metro setting, doing the transports. Moved into the county fire department in about 2002, 2004, moved into the metro department. After moving in the metro department, I survived nursing school somehow. I don't know how, but was able to successfully work in that profession for a short period. Got a lot of respect and a lot of perception on that. So, yeah.
I didn't know you were a nurse.
Yes, ma'am.
How many years did you do that?
So I'm still licensed to this day, but I haven't been working for, I don't even know how long. But I worked critical care ICU for about 4 years in one of the local hospitals. So
I knew you were smart. I just didn't know how smart.
I try not to lead or try not to let that out too much.
Not too much. How about you? You're probably a nerd, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I just been working locally in the area fire department since 2004. Got 19 years of experience. Or actually a total of 21 years of fire department experience. So we're a little bit long in the tooth.
Sure.
So,
any plans on retiring?
Yes, absolutely. I can say this, that it's one of those things that is rapidly approaching. It's one of those obstacles that has caused me anxiety.
Sure.
But there's good and bad to everything. So got to take out the good get the good out and do away with the bad and just kind of move forward. So that's kind of how I operate.
Oh, that's really cool. And it sounds like you've got a lot of options when you do retire from the fire department, especially with your paramedic license and then with a nursing license as well.
Yeah, we'll see. Those days might be numbered, but that's okay. I'll be good with it. So.
Are you wanting to remove yourself from medicine altogether?
That is a question that I struggle with daily. But the reality is, at least for me personally, and I don't know that, I think some people can share in this, but other people may not be able to. But a lot of my profession and my perception on how I conduct myself in our profession is this is not what I do. This is who I am. So it makes it very hard for me to separate myself. But that day has to come because I'm an old man playing a young man's game.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it. So.
And that is kind of scary when you're getting to that age and you're seeing, unfortunately, in our line of work, when people get out of the job, they kind of get lost.
Yeah, and I've talked to a handful of retirees that have been really pivotal in guiding me in that direction. And the other part of it is, at least from the fire department side, one thing that I do understand now is that, like, if you're not ready to leave, don't leave. Just because you have 20 or 25 years of service or whatever. I mean, we got guys that have been there for a long time. And, and if you're still loving the job and you're providing for your community and you're doing it for the right reasons and you're capable of doing it, then you should. And, well, that's my perception. So that's my plan right now. So that's what I'm going to do.
Well, thank you for your service, man. It's awesome. There are two kinds of people in this service. You're either in it for the community or you're in it for yourself because it's a job, right? And a lot of people treat it as just a job. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. You can treat it as a job because it is a job, and not everybody has that calling to do it, to save lives. Yeah. It's no different than working at, like, McDonald's. They were essential workers during COVID too.
Right.
And
I thank them for their service all the time because without that service, I couldn't do my service.
That's right.
I got to run on coffee. So yeah.
That's right. Coffee. That is a good one. So what made you reach out today, man?
So, overall, my years of experience that I have, I've noticed a generational difference because we have a next generation of, honestly, the eye-opener experience was when one of my rookies was one of my daughter's high school friends. So
that is a big
was
one.
eye-opening for me. Really good guy, really respectful, and I was like, all right, it's not just about providing service to the community. We got to look at the next generation. And I definitely have a handful of lessons, well, at least a couple lessons that I want to share with everyone today on, just some things that I think that I took away that I would like to pass forward. And
Sure.
just so that they can get through and cope and not, maybe avoid some of the mistakes that I made along the way.
Okay. And let's jump into the mistakes.
Well, I would like to jump into one of the fondest memories.
Sure, let's do it.
But it has to do with a level of tragedy.
Okay.
This tragedy will always shake me to my core, so if I get a little shaken up, my apologies.
No, it's
but
okay.
What happened specifically to me when I worked for the transport agency was I had an unexpected tragic event with my mother. My mother committed suicide.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Awful situation. But how would someone extrapolate good from that? So the day that it happened, I was snowboarding, I got home. And I was living with two other people that were working in the same place of employment. So everybody that was there understood our profession, understood the tragedy, the level of tragedy. So they were all awesome. But my roommate had to deliver that news to me. So that was one issue. The other issue is my other roommate that came home, he comes home with a sack full of money. And he hands this to me. He says, "They took a collection for you." That's one of the hardest things I've ever had to accept, but
Sure.
like cathartic in a different way.
Yeah.
And I learned so many lessons from that, but it really showed me, we talk about family in our profession all the time.
Yeah,
Come on now. Like, there's no better family than that.
that is
you know?
family. And people don't realize that coming from the outside, that this is, I've had to tell my wife multiple times, you're my wife, but I have a work wife, or I have a work husband, or I have a work family that I also have to help and deal with,
Yeah, and that I was really young in my career at that point. So when that happened to me, it took me to a level that I was like, wow, this is really where you belong. But there's some other lessons that I learned. And one of those lessons was that there's a split-second difference between being on the receiving end of tragedy and being somebody that's a provider.
Yes.
And that's huge when you start thinking about it from the level of a provider. Because now, any call that we respond to, that could be us. That could be your neighbor. That could be your friend. That could be your mother or father.
And it doesn't matter what age you're at or what time frame in your career you're in.
Yeah.
It literally can get dropped on you anytime.
Yeah, exactly. So when I realized that, it kind of helped me evolve as a provider to at least take a step outside of what we're there to immediately help with and help the family and make them a focal point of my care, not just a patient, but answer questions, providing a little bit higher level of customer service.
Sure.
So, and then putting them at ease or just discussing what you're seeing and why your concerns are, and that kind of seems to help family members adjust to whatever the situation is. Now, not all the time, but it helps them. So that was one huge lesson that I took away. One thing that definitely still strikes a nerve, like one of the guys is, I think it was a dispatcher and I forget his name, but his wife worked for the travel agency and went for a travel agency that got me on the plane out that night. Like, she was like, "When do you want to go?" "I got this flight, this flight, this flight. We can have you there before sunrise tomorrow morning." So the situation was dire. So that was another big, powerful thing for me. And then last but not least, going through all that stuff, the funeral, the family, getting back to work. But a few days later, I can't leave this out, but I did meet my wife, who we've been together since that moment. So
you met your wife through a tragic event.
Yeah, in the aftermath of tragedy, her and I just ended up connecting, and we've been together for 23, 22 years. I don't know. I hope she doesn't hear that part. But yeah, she was there.
In the medical field also? No. Okay.
No. Just happened. Just a coincidental meeting, and we were just very upfront with each other about each other's situation, and it's been a good ride. So, and we still continue to this day. So there's a lot of good that came from that.
That's good.
But the self-resilience that I got from it, the belonging of family, like the tangibility of what those words mean in our profession. Yeah, you can't put a price on it. And it still continues on to this day. I see it all the time in the fire department. I see it all the time amongst nurses, amongst police. Like, it's all over. So I think when the younger generation that's coming up, like, this is what you belong to. Like, people were here before you. People will be here after you doing the job.
Yeah.
So understand that, embrace that, and do nothing but your best, because that's what everybody deserves, right?
Yeah. And you've been in it for a while. You've gotten to see it evolve in some pretty crazy ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, from the times of, you know, before APD had their DOJ stuff, before, you know, just the evolution from the relationships between fire department and ambulance, and our system is so unique in that we interact with so many different agencies that those working relationships are, in my opinion, essential. And it's essential for just the public, and a good, solid, you know, flawless working relationship, understanding the roles of what an ambulance medic is going to be faced with versus a fire department versus medic's going to be faced with versus a nurse that's going to be receiving that patient. So I do possess what I would consider a unique set of eyes. So having worked on all those areas, but it's definitely watching that evolution, seeing our department medics and the suppression guys mesh in a way that is definitely becoming a lot more cohesive, a lot more just a lot more camaraderie is present, and that's amongst all agencies, not just within my department, you know.
That's good to hear. I know I miss my ambulance days. I don't miss working on the ambulance, right? Because we just, a lot of the time, we got the shit beat out of you, but I miss seeing you guys. I miss the camaraderie. And coming from the ambulance side with the fire department, it took like 2 or 3 years before the guys were finally like, oh, hey, Sam's here. Hey, cool. Yeah, I like Sam.
Oh man. And honestly, you know, to me, it kind of makes calls a lot more fun because you don't know who you're going to get. And I don't care who shows up. It's always like, hey, how can I help you? What can I do for you? Like, okay, this is what I got going on. This is what I'm thinking. And like, I might be the most senior medic on scene, but I'm still wanting to be a student of my craft and be better. So when I hear some new ideas or different ways to skin this cat, whatever it is, I'm all ears, just because there's always a way to improve.
Yeah, so and there's always things that are changing, right? Evidence-based medicine practices these days, or it's like literally every other day.
Oh, yeah.
You're doing something differently.
Oh, yeah.
As long as we're keeping up with it.
Right, exactly. And there has been, like, I mean, I guess when I first started, we were talking about beryllium, and no, not today. No. Yeah, so, but, yeah, I've seen evolution, I guess.
Right,
you know?
And at the same time, something like Levofed, right? It was Levofed, leave them dead.
Exactly.
And now we use Levofed for everything, mostly sepsis, but it's such a neat drug.
The tools that we have today, like, I would say there's at least 10 tools that we have in our protocols today that were not present back in 2000. They just weren't. It just didn't exist. And it's like to keep up with it is one thing, but when I talk to some of my friends that I went to medic school with, like some of them work in Denver, some of them work in Oregon, they're really not. They don't have the capability. Like, they don't have the kind of protocols we have. You know?
Oh yeah, no, especially in New Mexico. Protocol, our scope is huge out here.
Yes, and I think that's really a testament not just to our profession, but the capability of what paramedics, at least in New Mexico, can do and what we're entrusted with. So I think that's pretty powerful, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Sure.
You know? Yeah.
I'm sure maybe mask pants will come back eventually.
Oh, man. Have you ever wore a pair of those?
Yes.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, mask pants are
right.
always the running joke.
Oh, man.
They get the terrible part of it.
Dude, yeah, good times. Interesting stuff. That's for sure.
When you told me your story about your mom, you had actually described that as one of your fondest memories, which is interesting, right? And especially listening to your perspective. So I'm kind of afraid to ask what like one of your worst memories is.
Yeah, here we go. Let me take a deep breath because this one's always going to be tough for me. But what I wanted to do is paint a little bit of a picture of where I was at life, because I think where we are in life will impact how we're going to react.
For sure. I completely agree with that.
So when this call took place, I think my first daughter was born within 2 or 3 months. So I'd become a new parent, which is a new role and what most would consider a milestone in life. Okay. And of course, we're going to be talking about a horrible tragedy of a child.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. Big deep breath. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Take your time. That's why we're here, man.
So the guys that I went in with, they're all top notch, and that's a part of the positive that I take away from this. But it was a normal shift, and the call comes in as a fall, but the priority of that call was a Delta call. So
and Delta means extreme. You know,
extreme
there's
fall.
Life is in question.
Yes. So when I got in the truck, and I think it's important with my crew, I had a couple newer guys, and I just happened to be the medic with the most experience that day. Didn't mean I was not an officer at that time. I wasn't the guy in charge. It just happened to be, I guess, what we would call leading from the rear type of thing, or just giving direction. And my hat's off to my guys based on listening to me and doing what we did in the moment. Really, you know, regardless of the outcome, it's still kind of like one of those moments where everything meshed together the best that it could, despite the outcome. So on the way to the call, dispatch comes over the air, and they changed the coding from a 17, which is classified fall, to a 27. So
That's a really weird.
Like, why is this happening?
So a 27 is a
shooting
gunshot
started.
wound.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when that took place, I remember going, okay, this is what, like, all right, now the stakes are a little bit higher. The intensity level, just getting that information before you even walk in the door, has gone from what I would consider a bad fall as like a 7 or an 8. So you know you're going to walk into a 10, but you don't know what you're going to walk into.
Yeah.
So I remember when we got out of the truck, there's not a whole, I've been bits and pieces of this has been kind of suppressed, so I don't remember everything. But I remember getting out of the truck, and we walked in a single file, kind of like a SWAT team would enter or something like that.
Were the cops on scene already?
Yeah,
Okay.
They were there. And so it just so happened that when we walked in, I happened to be second or third. I'm not sure where I was. But when we were taken to the patient, I just remember seeing something that you just can't unsee. So I don't want to get too descriptive on that. But it was around a 4-year-old child, and he had a lot of blood coming out of the back of his head. And we're like, okay, so, you know, I was a little dumbfounded. But the two things that I do remember walking in is that there was a firearm in the room with him, and somehow the firearm went off. And we don't know. We just know that it went off. I'm like, okay, fine. When we got into the room, the kid was still breathing, still moving. And in that moment, I just knew that we can't be here. No. Nothing we're going to do is going to change anything. But this kid is breathing and he's moving. And we need to get out of here and go to the hospital. So I looked at my officer, and he was like, all right, Ryan, let's go. Like, we put a trauma dressing on, put the kid. I can't even recall if we transported in the local transport agency or if we transported our own rescue. I don't even remember that. I remember we getting to the hospital, and I remember turning over to patient care and taking a step back, and automatic nausea. Like, okay, you're processing something heavier. I had other child trauma experiences in my paramedic career, but that particular episode shook me. Now I know it's because of where I was at in life. I had just become a parent. So now there's a nerve that's present that I had never had before. Mm-hmm. I had to remove myself from the trauma room. The symptom that I was having was I would close my eyes and see my daughter's face, and then open my eyes and see this chaos.
Yeah.
And that was just repeating. So I took myself out of the environment and went to go catch my breath. So I was outside trying to choke back the tears, and it just outflowed, just huge. And I had never had this experience before, so I was kind of like, why am I crying? Like, you know, like, come on now. Like,
you don't understand why
I
you're
don't
processing this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, man, are you serious right now? Like, okay. And then my guy's like, right there. Are you okay? are you okay? Like, no, I'm not okay. Like, not okay. It was hard because of this newfound nerve. And what my officer, he gave me a hug. And I talked to him just last night about this event. And he was like, you know what? In that moment, like, that kid was no longer a patient to me. That was a family member. And he was like, that was what my breaking down did that for him. So, and he had a son at that age, or not that age, a little bit older, but most of us that were on that scene, I would say at least half of that crew were parents already. So we were affected in a different way. My unique circumstance was I just happened to be a first-time new parent, so I just wasn't prepared. And I don't think that there's any way that we can ever prepare, but understanding that can become a visceral experience through like your body, your emotions, and everything. It was huge for me, and there was a lot of growth that came from it. It kind of sounds kind of weird to say that there was growth that came from such a horrible experience.
Not at all.
But number one, like I said, like I've been falling back, my guys were there, which was awesome. Some concepts that I developed after that particular event was, I can tell you after that call, we called the chief, I went home that night.
Good.
I was like, no, I'm not capable of taking care of anybody else. At least I think I went home for 24 hours or maybe like a night. But there was symptoms that happened that night that were rough, but we survived it. And my wife was pivotal in that. She is, right there by my side. So she helped me get through that. But understanding that my level of capability was compromised, and there was no reason for me to continue on that shift until I was able to process that. So I did that. Some other things that kind of developed out of that was oftentimes when we respond to these calls, we talk about saving lives all the time, but my personal perception now is we're buying time.
So you're saying similar to what Rob said, we don't actually save lives, we buy time.
We buy time, yeah. And sometimes it happens to where that time's already spent before you show up. I think that, some of in that experience, there was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but just realizing that we weren't going to do anything for that kid who was still breathing and still moving, like we had to do something, and that's what we chose to do, right or wrong. We did what we could to give that kid a fighting chance. And as tragic as it turned out, it was definitely one of those things that I was like, oh, okay, this is really your role. This is a part of what we do. And it will, unfortunately happen again.
Right.
But that was a hard thing. The other hard thing that I realized, well, I don't want to say it's a hard thing, but something that I took from it is that, as parents, and that my heart goes out to that family. To this day, I feel that pain. This is one of my deepest scars, but a bad decision doesn't make a bad person, right? So, it's just one of those things, realizing that as much as I can't imagine what they were, how this affected them, we were affected too. And some positives that came out of it is understanding that concept of time.
Right.
Some other positives that I took away from it personally is it just made holding my kids a little bit more special, and meant stepping up more as a parent, and then also being a better husband and that sort of thing.
Right.
Those things are the things that I kind of took from that experience.
Well, you had mentioned how growth is kind of weird, right, coming from a call like this, but I kind of disagree with you, because I think the ability to grow from any call, bad, good, easy, hard, complicated, whatever, the ability to grow from anything, that makes you a better, not only a provider, but a better family person, and that's your family at home and your family for your crew, because now you have that set of resources that you can recall, and now how to help those future, like you've been saying, all of those future cadets, those crew members that you're going to have, those partners that you're going to help raise to be better providers also. So I think any growth in any situation is a good thing. Yeah,
and I agree with your assessment on that, absolutely, because you're right. It is anything that can force growth, but I guess we digress. The things that I took away from these particular events in my life, those were the things that I was like, okay, like if something bad's going to happen to me, let me at least figure out some level of positive and apply that.
Sure.
And that's really just the basics, the bare bones of what it's blueprinted in my DNA. So
Yeah.
I'll take it, you know.
That's good. It's a good mentality to have.
Yeah, and I think there's one other thing that I kind of wanted to at least give voice to was I think sometimes we kind of lose that perception. I think like you were saying, like ambulance is hard to work for. Like that's a hard place to do business for, at least for people that are in this for. What's the life expectancy for a paramedic? More than 5 years? And then there's some people that are doing this for 20 plus.
Answers.
Yeah, I don't know what that science is saying now, and I'm sure it's different from what it was when I started. But having, I guess, that perception and remembering those things helps me to continue doing what I do.
Right.
And if that's the message that I can convey to the guys that are coming up on the next generation, like, yeah, do it this way. Mistakes I made along the way included negative coping strategies. I think we've all had a little bit of a battle with alcohol or whatever your poison is in that day. That was mine for a minute, but quickly understanding that, like, the tragedy with my mother kind of kept me a little bit away from that.
That's
she
good.
struggled with that, so that was one of those things. But figuring out what strategies work for me, and figuring out that there's a time and a place that, okay, like, it's you might be working overtime, or you might be doing whatever it is, your shifts, your trades, or just working your regular shifts, but there's a time to detach and be able to flip that switch from being at home and not being the paramedic or the firefighter or the nurse or the cop or whatever it is you're doing in public service, to be home and just be, dad or husband.
Be present.
Exactly.
Yeah, be present when you're at home. And it is hard. It's hard to detach. I had this conversation with, I believe it was Robin. You get beat into almost so hard, like everything's an emergency. And that made it hard for me to go into restaurants, because now I'm keeping an eye out for everybody that's choking. And that made it hard for me to be okay when I went out with family, to a museum or to a movie or whatever. Like that, you have to physically work on being present with your family, or that can be detrimental to your own personal relationships. And I like how you talked about where you were at your time of life having affected your call, right? Because that is something that we don't even often think about, is keeping a good work and life balance, right? They tell you all the time, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. How can you take care of yourself when you're working 2, 3, 4 extra overtime shifts in a week? Because, and I get it, right? Financially, you're trying to make those bills work. You're trying to get that paid off, but you cannot take care of yourself. Yeah. If you're in that situation.
You're absolutely right, Sam. And the other thing that I started learning along the way is that I think everybody has their personal symptoms. Like you were saying, like when you go into a restaurant, you're paying attention to your surroundings, and we all have a heightened level of self-awareness. But so for me, I do share in that. Like I do not like sitting with my back to the door in any kind of a public venue, just period. It's just, I don't know why, this is the way it is. But some other symptoms that I've noticed along the way are specifically related to my sleep patterns. If I'm having trouble sleeping,
sure.
Specifically related to my irritability patterns. And one of the things that helps me is a fitness regimen. That's not for everybody, but that's what I prefer. That's one of my coping strategies. But knowing those symptoms for me personally, and knowing, okay, all right, it's, you don't need to work overtime this week, or you don't need to be, you got to tell people no for trades or whatever. I would say one of the biggest things that helps me, and I don't know that everybody can do this, but one of the things that helped me along the way is at some point I kind of remembered I reached I want to say everybody has that burnout phase, or that breaking point where work becomes something that's causing anxiety. And for us at the fire department, we can do a few trades here and there, and we can figure out a way to get a month or 2 off of work. And what I've learned is that for me, doing that at least once a year or once every other year is helpful, because when I'm off of work in that time frame, whatever that time frame is, whether it's summer or winter, I am not a paramedic. I am not present.
That's good.
I'm home or doing honeydews or whatever it is. I'm just, that whole switch is flipped to off. And now, what I've also learned is that when I get to the end of that time and it's time to go back to work, I'm excited to go back to work.
That's good.
I'm like ready, and it's one of those things that has helped me along the way. So,
I will say, getting out of the ambulance for me was a big eye opener, because when I left, I was having nightmares every day, and
I'm so sorry.
Probably for about 4 months. After that, it just continued before it finally started giving me a break.
Oh, really?
And then, and I was working at the hospital at the time, but I was only able to work 3 days a week. So I went from working 2-3 full-time jobs now to working at the hospital, where I'm being only allowed to work 3 days a week. And that forced me into a little bit of a separation.
Oh, good.
Which was good. Yeah, I wasn't dealing with the patient population that I had been dealing with at the ambulance. And don't get me wrong, I loved my job, right? We have those super exciting calls that we go to where we're superheroes. We do like to save lives, even if that's not what we're always doing. But getting that separation allowed me to really take a step back and progress onto the goals where I am now, where I'm flying.
Awesome.
And I've only had one job for the last 4 years. And for people that knew me, knew that I was working all the time, often, 120, 150 hours a week between 3 or 4 different jobs.
Right. I think, sometimes we're our own worst enemy when it comes to that. So, I can understand that.
Yeah. So now with my work schedule, I get, we're 2 on, 2 off, 5 on, 5 off. So every other week, I've got 5 days off.
You guys hiring?
Yes, we are. I'll send you the link later. We are. We're talking about switching to 24s, which makes me it does cause a little bit of anxiety for the 24s, because I worry about rest time, so your downtime. Because when you're in an airplane, there's a lot of moving parts, right? The plane is constantly vibrating, which can be exhausting. The heat is, can be, especially this time of year.
Oh, yeah.
We landed in Roswell the other night, and it was still, in the 90s at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, wow. It's hot. Even though the sun's not out, it's hot. And then you have all of the turbulence, and so it can be exhausting. And then doing that for a 24-hour period, where right now we're doing 12s, and I get to come home every night.
Oh, there you go.
Almost every night. Sometimes we get stuck in places, but very rare. So it's been nice.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now when I'm doing things like hobbying, such as podcasting, this is almost like a second job.
Oh, I imagine so.
It's another full-time. Tyler can attest to that. He's editing episodes. It takes about 6 hours to edit an episode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, but it's fun, and it's something that I choose to do.
Yeah.
Instead of having to do it now, I choose to do it.
Well, it's like I said before we really started engaging. Like, what you're doing is really, to me, it's reaching a lot of people. It's causing. I think people are taking notice. We're not always not everybody's gonna have the answer, but maybe having these conversations will at least lead us to one.
Right.
And that's a part of the reason why I was like, well, this is what I do that's worked for me, and I've been doing this for this amount of time, so let me share. And that was kind of why I reached out.
Helping people find the resources.
Yeah.
If they don't know where to go.
Exactly.
Is been one of the most super helpful parts, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Right on.
I'm enjoying it.
Oh yeah, you're doing great. You're doing great work.
Thanks.
So.
I appreciate it. So getting on to a little bit of a lighter side, have you done anything dumb at your job?
Have I done anything dumb? Gosh, so like I said, I am the I want people to learn from my mistakes, and I have done lots and lots of not the smartest things. Gosh, my earlier in the years, I was definitely not I would say there was a maturity challenge. So, whether it be with my coworkers or whether it be with even, certain patients that you build rapport with, you can kind of maybe, joke a little bit with.
Sure.
But, as far as some of the not so smart things that I don't want to say that I've done, but maybe not so smart things that I've said. But a lot of something that I still do to this day, and maybe it's not smart, but I don't know. I'll let you guys be the judge of it. But we oftentimes get called for falls, right? And one of the things I kind of lead with to kind of break the ice is I ask the person on the ground, like, okay, who pushed you down? And they always get a chuckle out of that one.
That's good.
But, I guess, and some, there's always like some of the stories that have occurred to me, I was like, some of the things that have happened, and I'll share this story real quick. It's a shorter one, and I promise you it's a lot lighter than what I've just disclosed.
It's all good, dude.
But I have never experienced this up until about a year ago, and what specifically happened on this call was this poor girl was in a club and somebody put something in her drink, and then she was found naked somewhere. Now, there's some unique perceptions and circumstances surrounding this event. I don't know how this girl had her cell phone because she didn't have any clothes on, but I guess they left her with their cell phone.
That was at least nice, I guess.
And this girl was also hearing impaired, which presents a unique communication obstacle, right?
It does, yes.
So, the cops happen to be present, the family happens to be present, and everybody is very visually upset. So I was like, okay, like, all right. So, but you can't just, normally when someone's got a hearing impairment, it becomes break out a piece of paper and write. What took place for me was she had an app, and the app calls into somebody who understands sign language, and then they speak what's going on. But I kind of developed a little frustration out of this situation because the person that I was on FaceTime with trying to get information would not stop translating. Like, I had to say, listen, I need you to talk to her. This I need to get some information.
I know she's upset, but let's take a break for a second.
Yeah, like, sure. I need you to stop moving your hands. And that kind of became my obstacle to overcome. So finally we were able to get that, or get her to communicate and figure it all out. But I remember sometimes, I think probably one of my not so shining moments is I will verbalize a thought that I don't intend to verbalize, like, oh, that accidentally slipped out, And I remember thinking, is this really happening? And then I hear a voice, and it was my partner, and my partner's like, and it's 3:00 in the morning. He's like, yes, it really is. So that like shocked me, like, oh, I said that. Sorry,
said it out loud.
Yeah, I didn't intend for that to happen. But yes, that was one of that, and yeah, that just happened recently. So fortunately, the girl was fine. So that was a positive takeaway from it. But it's definitely one of the I think some funny things that happen with our job. Really, like, who would imagine something like that happening?
Sure.
And then you're like, really, like, and then we're called to address the situation, and it just makes for some interesting challenges. So yes,
I think sometimes, or I should say oftentimes, EMS is kind of the go-to, like, there's
the catch-all,
right? If there's no answer to anything else, even if they're not medically, like, if there's no medical problems, we're still going to be the catch-all, because it's like, well, the cops don't know what to do, so they just call for an ambulance.
Yeah, and I think that's a part of our system that's evolving. I think we're trying to figure out different ways to take heat off of fire department and transport. And I've seen our administration think outside the box and continue to do so, and work with the other agencies to figure out better ideas. I mean, like, Uber really is a godsend when you think about it. Like, we can solve a lot of problems with that. There's countless numbers of programs in the city. I don't know what they are. I'm just saying that, like, we didn't have community paramedicine when I first started, and now it's a thing on multiple agencies.
And I think that's evolved into such a weird, like, oh man, community paramedicine for me was so exciting, because I was like, cool, we're going to start doing house calls, or we get to start responding to people's houses for things that maybe didn't come across as super emergent, and it's evolved into this much more dynamic role where they're responding for frequent flyers.
That's one thing absolutely I agree with. But the other thing that I at least I've picked up along the way is that when we are able to develop a relationship, like, most of the time 911 calls, it's 10, 20, 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more than an hour, and then you never see that person again, or you might catch a follow-up from a medical director.
Sure.
But that community EMS concept really allows people to kind of provide in a different level to get into people's lives and to affect change. And watching that develop is not just personally powerful for me because it's such a like, oh, okay, like now I have a resource. Now it's not just here, let me put you in the circle of the emergency room.
Sure.
Now we can provide you a resource to actually get to the root of your problem.
Right.
Now, like there's going to be successes and failures within that, but just having that resource, I can't speak enough about it. They're doing really good work. At least I know our with the department I work for, yes, they're doing great work.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that they had community medics in your position, which is cool. How does that work? Are they charging insurance?
I really don't have concrete yes or no answers because
Okay.
I honestly don't know. I hear that they are. I know that we're starting to do that for the transport side of things too as well. So, but I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, I believe that they are. But the great thing about that is, with the fire department is in general, we're a public service agency. So working for our city, those guys have access to programs that like the normal street paramedic just isn't aware of.
Sure.
And we're, access through insurance companies, case managers, social workers, all these different programs that like, I'm sorry, we definitely don't get taught that in paramedic school.
No. Yeah.
So those are some things that they're able to affect, which is super, it's just awesome in my eyes, in my personal opinion. They're doing great work.
Yeah, the community paramedics are working very similar to social workers, which is really cool. And it gives people the opportunity to do things if, like, maybe they go on light duty, right? If you get injured in the field, you can't do that anymore, but maybe you can do this. Or I know you guys have dispatches options as well.
Yeah, it's definitely providing some different options to paramedics. And really, truth be told, I think it's the wave of the future for a lot. I think we're in the baby phase of that particular program, but listening to what we're doing and comparing what I'm hearing to what my friends are in Denver are doing and Oregon and all the other places, I'm like, oh, everybody's kind of catching on board. And the other part of it, I think it's affecting our profession as a whole because, when we start comparing nursing to paramedic, nursing's got a wide view of places that you can practice, right?
Sure.
And when you just speak about a paramedic, most people associate a paramedic with an ambulance or a fire truck or, so we're opening the doors to opportunities and possibilities, and it's definitely like I'm excited for those guys. It's definitely fun to watch, and that's truth be told, I'm just happy to be able to provide a little bit more service to let's get you to the hospital right now, but let me enroll you in this program and somebody's going to reach out, so this way we can get you some fall prevention or we can talk about some options that you might need,
Right.
So
and you had talked briefly, I feel like it's an important topic. So you had said, or you had mentioned that the fire department is kind of starting to charge for those transports. I think that is a necessity, right? Because how many times do we roll up and they're like, I want to go with the fire department because the fire department's free.
Yeah, that is a tumultuous topic.
It is.
I think it's long overdue in a couple different ways. It's one of those things that, we're providing a service to the community and, service costs.
It does cost.
That's just, and we can't,
I don't think that people realize how much it costs when you're calling. And, this, I don't mean to downplay it, right? Say you break your toe and you have access to a ride where you can get a ride to the hospital because it is painful. Don't get me wrong, I've broken a toe. It is painful. But it costs a lot of money to send that engine crew or the rescue crew on top of, the transport company. And it is a service and we're glad to do it. But we're at a point now where the transport service is so overrun that they are constantly at level 0. And level 0 means that there aren't any ambulances available in the city at that moment because they're all on other calls.
Absolutely. And I would definitely like to speak to that from a call point of view. Like if I'm coming across that now and it's forced me to develop something that I use for people that are in low acuity and it's very clear, I just try to educate them because a lot of the community believes that if I hop in that ambulance, I'm going to get to the front of the line. And that's just the myth that is no longer, it doesn't exist anymore. No. And what I tell them is like, listen, we're happy to get you the transport, but it's not going to guarantee you a bed. And you may be a very expensive ride to a waiting room. And you will be financially responsible for that. If you have insurance, I don't know the odds and ends of that, but I'm just going to educate you on these are the bare bones minimum facts. And people oftentimes, okay, well, and then if you want, we can figure out other opportunities. I'll wait here with you for your parents to get here, or your grandmother, grandfather, whatever the situation is.
Sure.
We'll accommodate them. But that's one of those things where, as paramedics, we get the opportunity to still provide help, provide education, and still help them with their problem overall.
I think it's really cool that you talk about that. It's like you are providing a service that maybe isn't in our job description, right? But we still do it. I think one of my favorite calls ever was for a lady who could not, for the life of her, get her doctor to write a script for a glucometer, and she was diabetic.
Oh, my Lord.
And she didn't know what else to do. She couldn't check her sugars without calling the fire department or calling the transport service. And I sat down with her, and it took probably about 45 minutes to an hour to get a hold of a provider that would write her a script. And I actually went through one of the local facilities, called a contact. Hey, I know you're on today. Here's what we've got. Do me a favor. This is the pharmacy that this patient uses. This is when they can get there. Can you please send a script in for a glucometer?
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Sure thing, no problem, and we were able to facilitate getting that piece of equipment for her, even though she couldn't do it herself.
See, that's that kind of outside the box thinking. That's the stuff that makes our providers a little bit like that. When you start thinking like that, and your contact, was that like a friend of yours, or?
It's just an acquaintance that I knew through working this job, right?
There you go. Yeah. So I just, when we are able to do that and affect change like that and still, provide, that's the kind of service that I really I kind of get excited about.
Yeah, you enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Helping that person in a way that doesn't just involve driving the boo-boo bus, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So
we had talked a little bit about how you would talk to your therapist before you came in.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you, and why did you talk? Did you feel it necessary to do it, or because you were afraid of, coming on and sharing your personal experiences, or? So,
first of all, I think therapy is different from different people, and for me, my therapist is if she wasn't my therapist, she'd be my friend.
Oh, that's great.
There are very few professionals that are out there that truly can connect with a first responder in any capacity, and I've been fortunate enough to find one. So when I reached out to you, I knew that I wanted to share this with you, but I wasn't sure how it was going to come out, and I was afraid of it. That's just the reality of it. And even earlier, you can hear it in my voice. It still bothers me to this day, but those are bags that I'm going to carry. I'm good with it, and understanding that it's a part of it. But getting the sets and reps and talking about it does help me. But and what I think people need to remember is that people that are on your show are sharing experiences that is actually reliving the trauma. Our brains don't know that difference. So, and that's why I still get choked up. That call happened over a decade ago, and it's like yesterday to me. Despite the fact that my newborn child back then was probably months old, she's 15 now. So if that's going to put some tangibility behind my story and share with your listeners what people go through and communicate those experiences, it takes a lot of courage. And so I knew that I wanted to do that, but getting back to why talking to her about it, because she has a great way of getting me to see some things through different lights. And that, to me, or at least processing the information that leads me down a positive path. And I think personally, just as my opinion, that's the mark of a good therapist. That's the mark of what somebody's really there to do, to really help people. And I've been blessed to find that. So I definitely was okay, I got to tell you, I'm going to do this podcast, but this is what I'm going to share. Let's talk about it. She's like, okay, let's go. So it was good. Yeah,
I was telling you before, that you're actually not the first person to tell me that you did that, which is really neat. I think that's, if you have somebody that you can talk to like that and get you kind of prepped for something that, in my opinion, this is a podcast, this is just for hanging out, Right. And then I'm blessed to have people coming in and sharing those experiences. And in that, I'm also sharing some of my experience. And that's cathartic for me. Those good old days, when we hung out on the scenes a little while longer, after a car accident cleanup, or, at whatever we did, and hanging out and getting to tell those stories and share those stories with people, that was cathartic for me. So getting to do this and relive some of these experiences, whether they're good or bad, and sharing the emotions of them is helping.
Yeah, and I think sometimes an old friend of mine kind of taught me this, or actually, when we get fearful, he taught me a concept. He was like, when you're feeling like things are out of control, you kind of need to go into your 3-foot world. You need to just focus on what you can focus on and just take it one step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, like one thing at a time. And the reason I'm kind of thinking in those terms is like just understanding that, like, if you go into your 3-foot world, oftentimes that kind of puts you on a small island by yourself. And sharing with, we all know that we all have our own, like in our profession, we all know that we see bad things, but listening to other people's story is like, oh, okay, like that island just got a little bit bigger.
Sure.
That like, I'm not alone on that. And how did this person, actually I remember, I'm not sure what her name was. I think it was Katie, one of the nurses that you interviewed. I'm like, yoga retreat, that sounds like a great therapy. I'm in, like, I don't even do yoga, but I'd be willing to go to
I can
a
get you
place
that
in the middle.
information if you want.
Like, when I see you in the emergency room, I'll be like, hey, where's that retreat at? But sharing not just our bad, but like, hey, this is what I did to get me through it, and it worked. Or this is what I did, don't do that.
Sure.
Like, okay, all right. Like, so I think those are the bonds that we develop as professionals. But I think mostly, the take home message is that, you're not alone. And if you're struggling, like there's somebody out there who's willing to listen. And now that our department's developing peer support, I think they have it to other agencies. That's a huge thing. Or finding that therapist,
right.
Finding that person that you can connect with. And I think, connections are powerful, right? So.
And I've said this multiple times, don't be afraid to fire your therapist. If you're not making the connection that you want, find somebody else. But at the same time, you're putting it on yourself. It is your responsibility to take care of yourself and to help yourself.
Well, how can we take care of others if we can't take care of ourselves, right?
Exactly. So what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
What piece of advice? Well, getting to my early immature years, I would definitely take the foot off the gas on some of those things. And that was just, some in-house, rough house antics that, you put a bunch of guys in the station and we'd get bored, something's going to get broken, or so that's really just kind of
I couldn't imagine that at all.
But as far as the advice that I would give my younger self is to enjoy the ride, embrace the good with the bad. Knowing now what I know, I'm like, no, like I honestly, I think everybody, with whatever your spiritual belief is, people have a purpose, and my purpose was to help people. So I in my DNA, I know that I was put on this planet to help people one way or the other. And I'm capable of doing that. And I guess I don't suck at it, so I'm going to continue to do so. So I would just, enjoy the ride and take the good with the bad, and know that, recognize a bad day. And, if you don't need to be at work, don't go to work.
Yeah.
Like, hey, like sometimes those mental health days are a lot more valuable than what we give them credit for.
And we get PTO for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Use it. Don't be afraid to use it.
Exactly. And, like bills will always be there. Work will always be there. It's always going to, that stuff will take care of itself. So I think when we get caught up in those stresses and, we're our own worst enemy. I got to get these bills paid for, so I'm going to work extra. But when I work extra, I get a bad flare up of PTSD, and then we're dealing with that. So understanding that's a cycle that exists, and recognizing that. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Did you ever do anything that like you haven't lived down? People see you and they still kind of make fun of you for it.
Oh yeah.
So I in one of my ambulances, way back when I started, most people know, right, that diesel and gasoline don't mix very well.
Oh, this poor girl.
At a young age, I had never done anything with diesel before. I didn't know that the nozzle was bigger on a diesel fueling.
Oh, interesting.
So on a gasoline ambulance, I was holding the diesel
Oh,
nozzle
no.
above because it didn't fit in the gasoline hole, so I was holding it and filling it that way.
Oh,
So I was like,
wow.
well, I think it'll fit. It should fit.
You know, my hat's off to you. You had to figure out a way to get that done.
Yeah, I did figure it out. And then we started driving it, and it was making a bunch of noises.
Oh,
And
man.
that was a fun
good
phone call
one.
to the supervisor.
I have been present for some of those calls. Fortunately, it has not been me. I will say, oh, yeah, here's one that I'm going to say this, and I thought I've lived it down because it's been so much time in between, but the second I say this, and whoever's listening is going to be like, hey, remember that time? And it's going to come back to me. So I was effectively able to have fender benders with a rescue, an engine, and a ladder all within the course of 3 months. So we were once a month. I had a rough period there, so adding slump. But that was back in my driving days, of course. But yeah,
Which is why you're not a driver anymore.
yeah, it was like clearly time to promote.
They told you had to promote. They're like, okay, right.
Yeah. So, but yes, I was, and fortunately there was nobody hurt. But honestly, even one of those incidents with the engine happened to involve an ambulance with a patient in the back. So yeah, it was
My goodness, right?
Yeah, we heard about that for a minute. Yeah, like I think I got out of that. I think people stopped talking to me about that. We're 2023, probably right before COVID, that got forgotten.
So easy to forget during COVID,
yeah.
right?
So thank you, COVID.
You're kind of slapping yourself here by bringing it back up,
right?
huh?
Oh yeah,
So
it is what it is.
Did COVID affect you in any way?
Yes, it did. It's pretty eye-opening. Boots on the ground is boots on the ground, but in a pandemic, it's very eye-opening how sickly these people are, and understanding I've seen, working in the ICU setting, I was there for H1N1 and some of the other bad episodes with disease processes, but COVID really, for me, seeing it and from the field point of view and seeing how sick some of these patients were is very scary. And my in-laws are immunocompromised, so contact with them, and they're very much about their grandkids. So contact with them, I really felt for them. So that's how it felt for me, because they're also my rocks when it comes to, I got a situation, can you help me? And they come and help me out, like no questions asked. The other part of it was like, now I work, I go out, I'm boots on the ground. And now I come home and I can't, fortunately we were able to get through it with, because my wife was still working, and that kind of pushed her into a change of careers, which was beneficial to both of us. But at the end of the day, it definitely affected our family in that. And my kids were like, hey, they're kind of missing their grandparents and that sort of thing. So that was one of the ways it affected me. But I would say, like, seeing how sick these people were, and understanding the level, the mystery of it all. Like, we didn't know what we didn't know. Truthfully, I think I probably had COVID right before the pandemic hit. So
You were sick,
I remember
didn't
getting
realize
sick,
it.
and I was like, I never get sick. And then all of a sudden, I was like, wow. And then like, I would say maybe 2 or 3 months later, like, oh, okay,
Everybody's
that might have been
sick, yeah.
like, that might have been that. So that was my experience with it. And truth be told, like, having the staffing level, like, we weren't, like, fortunately we didn't have anybody pass away from it, but people were getting sick. So staffing levels at that time was like, we're already low staffing right now without COVID. Now you add COVID into that mix, and that like multiplied it times, that staffing problem was multiplied like probably times 10.
Oh, I'm sure.
That might be an exaggeration, but we definitely had some struggles.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. So yeah.
And that's hard, because what do you do with low staffing in a public service like that? You just hope that people are going to want that overtime money. Did you guys offer incentives?
No, my department did not, but I think for me personally, I think I worked 72 hours straight every shift for the better part of maybe 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
So it was just like 3 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, 3 days off, sometimes an 82-hour shift, because that's our cap. But yeah, it was a challenging time. And fortunately, I was at a slower station at that
that's
time.
good.
So it wasn't too brutal, but other times we're still, exposed after exposed. Like, I literally, getting home was like a decontamination process in my own house.
Yep.
So that was always, like, okay, like leave a spare set of clothes in the garage so I can go in, shut the garage, disrobe. I'm surprised my wife didn't take a pressure washer to me.
You're walking
Really,
in the
thanks for not doing that. But yeah, it was eye-opening and quite, you know what, it'll be an experience that I'll never forget. That's
I
for
don't
sure.
think any of us in the medical field will forget COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Even those of us that were affected, a little more lightly than others.
Oh yeah.
What's considered a slower station for you? Like, how many calls are you averaging in a? You guys do 48s? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
we do 48s, and when you're first promoted in our department, you lose your seniority. So when I was first promoted, I worked at one of the stations along Central, and at that time, it was not unheard of to run 37, 40, over 40 calls a cycle.
Yeah, in a 48-hour period.
In 48-hour
insane.
period. So fortunately, our department has recognized the problem and they're addressing it. So
That's good.
That's a positive.
I can't imagine you guys going. That's hard for everybody. I think that's hardest for the drivers, right? Because now you are responsible not only for you and your crew, but for everybody else around you while you're driving lights and sirens.
Yes, and it's like that is really like you're really compromising safety with that. So and that's why I do give credit to our department for realizing like, oh, we got to do something quick, and they have.
Good.
By adding other units, which is definitely helping the situation. When you compare that to working at a slower station, and there's good and bad to working a slower station because we're paid to be available. My dad used to get like, you don't really work, you're just going to hang out with your friends. Like, no, like I'm paid to be available for that 48-hour period, and I will answer that call and do what needs to be done. But when it comes to working slower stations, like if there's not anything going on, then you're kind of left to your own devices, which is okay. For me, I prefer to read or work out or something, but it becomes a different kind of challenge because it's easy to become complacent. Like,
yes.
You got to break out your protocols and refresh that. You might not see a code that year where if you're working along a busier station, you're going to see 3 codes in one cycle. So you will be more proficient. So it's a different kind of challenge, but I guess I would describe it as both good and bad, depending on what you like. I personally, I like to be busy enough. So I don't want to be at the slowest station in the city. That's not my thing. I like to be at a station where it keeps me on my toes, but I'm able to not have chronic sleep disturbances.
Sure.
So that's kind of fortunately where I've been able to land right now.
So how many would you say you're averaging now in a cycle?
In a cycle, it's really hard to tell with what the cycle will bring or what the shift will bring, but we will range like 10 to 15 calls in 48, and then a busier can get up to the upwards of 30s. With the station that I'm at now, I think that we're average, like a rough day is 24 calls maybe, and then and then a lighter day we have seen some shifts where 10 calls. So.
Right, and even like you said 24, that's still one every other hour.
Yes.
Yeah, that's still fairly busy because in between that you still have to eat, you still got to shower, you still got to
exactly.
You still got to live,
Yeah, exactly. Oof. So that's part of the gig, I guess.
Yeah, that is part of the. Hats off to you, man, because I don't miss those days.
I will say this: like moving to a slower station does allow for a little bit more chronic sleep. I think for me, when I was talking earlier about what my symptoms were, and one of the things that I've suffered from, or that we all suffer from, is a chronic sleep deprivation, and that's when things get sideways for me. When I'm like tired on over the course of months and months and months, that's where things start to spin out of control. And so when I recognized that earlier in my career at the busy station, I was like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. I need help with my sleep. Because the other problem that I was suffering from was I would go home that first day and just be completely exhausted. And I would keep myself up during the day, but at night I would be out at 7, and then my problem came at midnight, because if something woke me up I couldn't go back to sleep the next day.
Yeah, that's rough.
That was a struggle. But once I figured it out, and there's plenty of some safe natural sleep aids that are out there that kind of helped me, and that was one of those things that I was able to fix myself with. So yeah.
I forget how spoiled I am now. And maybe it's an old age thing. I don't know. Being younger, I used to function on 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, and now I get fucking pissy if you wake me up before 8 hours. I'm like, do not talk to me.
Right? Like, I think we kind of overlook how important sleep is.
We do.
I will say this. I remember earlier in my career, one of the guys had just retired, and he was at a busy station his entire career. And I was like, why did you stay here? And for him, it was about, that wasn't just a busy station. He was with that crew for the better part of a decade. So they had connected on a different kind of family level that, it was impressive. But he came by the station for a visit, and he had just retired like a month ago. I was like, well, what you been doing? And he was like, I've been sleeping. Like, I've been catching up on my sleep. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, went and got a sleep study done, found out a handful of issues, got the necessary equipment to fix that. But he was like, I will sleep 14 hours a day to catch up. He was like,
Holy
I was
smokes.
like, wow. He's like, now it's not going to be that forever. But that was just what he shared with me. And I remember going, uh-oh. Okay, pay attention to that. That's a red flag.
This is what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. I think in the last few years, enough sleep studies have been done to show that is one of our biggest and most important things.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely one of those things that, like, if I was going to let the next generation know, hey man, make sure you're sleeping. It's pretty important.
And how do you get sleep when you're running 48s? That's so hard. How do you catch up if you're not just sleeping the whole day you're off?
I really don't have an answer to it. I can tell you that my functionality can exist. Like, I've developed the skill of power napping. Like, if I can close my eyes for 5 minutes, I can be functional.
Yeah.
I could tell you that earlier in my career, when I was chronically sleep deprived at some of the busier station, even in my driver years, I was able to, might sound off, but this is truth. I was able to drive to the call. If it was a bad trauma patient, render care, get the patient to the hospital, do patient turnover, do all those things, and then get to the fresh air outside in the bay and be like, oh, I just woke up. Okay. Like, everything became that level of muscle memory. But realizing, okay, now you're compromised. Let your officer know, like, hey, like, I think I just slept through this call, or just making sure that you're getting that rest on the days off. I think that's hugely important. So
are the officers able to drive if the driver just feels okay? That's good to know.
And that's one of those. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about that now. Like, being at the slower station, but paying attention to, like, are you tired? Like, hey, what's going on? You good? Okay. Or at least maybe that gut check, or roll down your window. I don't care if I'm cold. Just roll down your window so we don't die.
Yeah, wake up. So. And you've had a long day when you've driven home and didn't have music on the whole ride.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're just not,
I call it zombie mode.
One goal is getting there.
Yeah, I call it zombie mode. Like, and I think, like, I've been able to communicate with my wife, like, I'm in zombie mode. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are my red flag terms. She's like, oh, okay. All right. And then, and then I'm hitting my wall. Okay. That means that I am going to bed in the next 5 minutes, regardless if it's 4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
or whatever it is,
yes.
So,
my wife can tell, like, if I'm getting into a certain position, she's like, I'll see you in a few hours.
Bye.
Like, I know you're not going to move for the next several hours, but I'll keep checking on you to make sure you're breathing okay.
There you go. That's always good. Don't let me stop breathing, please.
But that's so funny. So if you could go back and do it all over again, would you continue in medicine?
Continue on from this profession? No.
You wouldn't?
No, absolutely not.
What would you do?
Well, hold up, hang on. Let me make sure I'm understanding your question. Are you saying that I would continue on to go further in medicine?
Like, if you could go back to day one, Would you get back into medicine?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That answers unequivocally yes. Absolutely. Sorry, I thought you meant, like, would you go on to, like, become a PA or something? My apologies.
No, I mean, you're already a nurse and a medic, dude. You've got the best of both worlds there.
Like, honestly, yeah, I'm just a top-seeded amateur is what I call myself. But, absolutely, yes. You know, a lot of reason why I found myself in nursing school is because I was after job satisfaction. But what I learned was to adopt a different set of eyes, and it actually helped me in my paramedic profession to see what happens after. When it comes to just telling myself whether or not I would do it again or not, absolutely. There's a lot of job satisfaction, or I get a lot of job satisfaction, not just from running calls, but from when I operate with a team of guys that are cohesive. Like, it's almost magical for me. And every time it happens on a high intensity call, which we know that they come few and far in between, it's one of those things that I'm just still thankful for. Like, and yeah, 24 years later, I'm like, oh, that was cool, you know. And now that my daughter's getting into her teenage years, she asked me those questions, and those are the things I get to share with her. So I'm still excited to go to work.
Yeah,
and I would definitely do it all over again, you know.
So absolutely. What would you tell your daughter if she told you she wanted to get in the fire department?
I would clearly be supportive, help her prepare in any way possible, you know, whether it becomes fitness or just, you know, mental tenacity, you know, because a lot of the stuff that we, at least with our academy, it's very strenuous, and it was a welcomed, I was excited about it when I was happy to be yelled at. I don't know. It probably has to do with coming from a military background and upbringing, because that was how I was raised. So it was like being at home. So I would definitely help her in any way possible. And, you know, and just get her to recognize, like, job satisfaction isn't going to be running into a burning building all the time. And those happen few and far in between. But if you're making grandma laugh while she's on the floor and you're helping her in that moment, it's probably going to mean a lot more to someone in those moments. A lot more to that family, a lot more to that person. And those are the things I share with her. And now that she's old enough, I think she's starting to get it. So it's pretty cool.
And we've talked a lot about your medical side, right? But you are a firefighter. Is that still something that you look forward to doing also?
Yeah, when we have those events, whether it be a structure fire or a wildland fire or something, it's such a coordinated effort. And I think that, you know, we have we have our standard operation guidelines called SOGs. They're similar to protocols, and different conditions exist for a single family structure, whether it's a 1-story or 2-story or an apartment building or an industrial building. And I think there is a great art to firefighting and coordinating resources and making assignments. And having had to go in as on the rescue side as a rescue officer, our primary task is going to be search and rescue. But having a little bit of experience into an upgraded captain position, sitting in the command seat and everybody asking you, what do you want us to do? What is our assignment? And then doing that in a coordinated effort, that's also satisfying too. You know, don't get me wrong, I like to go into a burning building and pull somebody out. If you don't grab the hose, I will.
Yeah.
But you know, there's just different types of job satisfactions that I've been fortunate to see throughout my career. So yeah.
Sure. Did you ever work on the engine?
Yeah. My probationary year, and actually the year I went to nursing school, I was assigned to a ladder. So yeah, I got that experience, but you know, we're shorthanded on the medic side. So as soon as that driver promotion became available, that's kind of what I was forced into. Now I think that in the future, I will be able to move off the rescue with a promotion that should be happening, but we'll see what happens. Like, you know, we're not going to count our eggs before they hatch.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So is that something that'll put you more into, because you'll still do EMS, right? I mean, all the fire trucks will still respond out depending on how many vehicles are available or whatever. But is that going to take you a little further away from the medical side?
I think so, yes. But to me, that's kind of going to be refreshing because it'll be a new chapter.
Sure.
And I'm excited about it. New challenges. I'm excited about new challenges all the time. You know, like I said, I'm always trying to evolve. So that's one of those things that I'm looking forward to. And yeah, essentially in our department, once you promote past the rank of lieutenant, the that does put you in a different capacity. But the good part of after lieutenant comes captain, and the good part about being a captain from my point of view is that it's not the point that you're in charge of everybody. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in helping to facilitate growth, but the captain should be able to do everybody's job.
Yes.
And that's really the appeal, and guide guys on, you know, what needs to be done and that sort of thing. So that's really the, like, you know, in my department, technically it's a bit of a pay cut, but it's never been about money for me. So I'm okay with it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably one of my favorite parts too. I did tactical EMS for a little bit, and when we responded anywhere across the state.
Oh, wow.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you had to familiarize yourself with the EMS systems in the locations that you were going to, as well as the, you know, being able to find which hospital you would transport to if you had to transport, which ambulances you would use. If the state helicopter could get out there faster, then you could use them and set up landing zones. Like you were doing all of this in the position that I worked, because we were there for the guys, right? We were there for the team. We weren't there for patient care. That's a different
capacity. Yeah, that's something I haven't experienced. That sounds really fun and cool.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. You know, I didn't have a lot of calls doing that one, but the thinking about it and preparing for it and the training that we got out of it, like we did a lot of bomb squad training, and we did a lot of the canine training because we got to work with the canines. And
really cool.
That was a really exciting few years for me.
That's good. Wow, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah,
cool.
It was a lot of fun. They still do the team. I don't know to what capacity that they're currently working at, but it was a really neat.
Was that through the state?
It was through,
or I mean, like, of course you know, but I mean, like,
it was. We worked with the state tactical team.
Oh, okay.
But we were through a local facility here.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about that.
I'll get it to you.
Right on.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming out and for sharing all of these great stories, the good, the bad, and the funny. It has been a really good interview today.
Thank you. You're doing great work, Sam. Like, I can't say enough about you. And thank you. Like it's an honor to be able to share my stories with everybody. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, and keep sharing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for listening. Before we wrap up, we have a few important announcements to share with you. Firstly, we're excited to announce the launch of our brand new 911 Nonsense Facebook group page. It's a community where everyone can go to connect, share ideas, discuss topics from the show, and get all of the most recent updates about the podcast. We'd love to have you join us and be part of the conversation. Next, we want to ask you to rate and review our podcast on your preferred platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach a wider audience. By rating and reviewing the show, you'll be supporting us in a big way and helping others discover 911 Nonsense. If you enjoy what we do and would like to support the podcast even further, we have a few options available. You can visit samspursuit.com to find the links to our 911 Nonsense merch page and our recently released Noon gear page. Every contribution, no matter the size, goes a long way in helping us continue to better the podcast. We know that not everyone is comfortable being on the podcast, but we still want to hear your stories and experiences. If you have a compelling story and would like to share it to be read by me in a future episode, please reach out to us via email at 911nonsense@gmail.com or through our website's contact section. If you choose to be anonymous, we'll make sure to respect your privacy while sharing your story in a way that resonates with our audience. Thank you again for tuning in. We truly appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more engaging content in the future. See you next week.